Welcome to our next episode of the Heroes of the Heart podcast. I'm Steve Garvin, the story architect, and joining me today, our hero of the heart is Kate Findley. And Kate has been on a bit of an adventure of her own. Kate is the boss lady of Generate Magic, which is all about to our next episode of the Heroes of the Heart podcast. I need to just remember to, okay, anyway, here we go. So Kate Findley is the head boss lady of Generate Magic, which is all about making magic out of every moment, even the crappy ones, and using the raw materials of your life to weave an awesome tapestry. She helps you move from bored with it all to thrilled to be alive, from professional victim to the engineer of your life. So you can stop settling for mediocrity and start showing up as a superstar you were meant to be, while experiencing a deeper sense of fun and fulfillment in all areas of your life. Welcome to Heroes of the Heart, Kate. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So Kate, I am curious, in your bio, you talk about going from bored with it all to thrilled to be alive. Was there a time when you were bored with it all?
Yes, absolutely. And I think for me, well, I know I mentioned in the bio the professional victim, which I have certainly been at many points in my life. But I was also a professional student. And for me, not so much the aspect of the social aspect of school, that wasn't so fun for me, but the learning aspect of school, I just loved. And and in college, my parents kept saying, I should really think about doing something practical, or at least taking like a few practical classes, like business or law or accounting or something like that. But instead, I only took classes that that really excited me, like Love and Art and Japanese Literature was like the title of one of the classes. And yeah, just classes in like film and art and philosophy. And then right after college, I got accepted into an MFA writing program. And there was something inside of me that was saying, well, maybe I should take a little break, in school. And one of my professors, my college professors, was actually sort of advising me to do the same. But then I actually ended up getting like a full scholarship to the creative writing program. And so I was like, well, I guess I have to go. and so then, I did that. And that was also like a blast. It was very intense. Like we read a novel a week. And we were also just constantly producing stories and doing writing workshops. And I just remember constantly feeling like energized and stimulated. And even though I only probably got like 4 hours of sleep each night, I was always just so like excited. And then all of a sudden school was over and I had no clue what I was going to do. And on top of that, my professors, well, because, they were professors, they weren't like professional writer. Well, they were professional writers, but they weren't really making a living writing, which is why they were teaching. And so they were very kind of like negative, like they were saying, oh, there's no hope in the publishing industry. It's all, and one professor even told me, he said that I was going to have a really hard time. And he said, not because I wasn't good, but because my stories were really weird. And so, and so and while I was in school, I had been waiting tables just to support myself. And, it's just kind of a good side job to have like while you're in school, but I don't really know, what else I was going to do once I finished school. So I just kind of kept waiting tables. And the thing was, I was also like a terrible waitress. I couldn't even really do the thing where you like hold the plates, the 3 plates on your hand, your arm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would try, but the plates would be like, jiggling, and the customers would be kind of scared that it was going to fall on their heads.
Oh my.
So I felt like I just had nothing to offer, that I was no, no skills, and yeah, and suddenly I had been getting all my, I guess my stimulation, from school and from all these classes, and suddenly that wasn't there anymore. And so, yeah, I guess I fell kind of into this really kind of apathetic state where I just no longer really had interest in anything. And so, yes,
Mm.
so that's kind of where the board with it all came from.
Mm. I can relate to a lot of that. One, I waited tables before I went to college, and I'm not sure if I did. I guess I did while I was going to college, and then again after I went to college. And while I actually got pretty good at balancing all the plates and doing all the big trays and all that kind of stuff, I do remember one incident. I was working in this penthouse restaurant. It was a really nice restaurant. We would get celebrities in there pretty regularly. And I remember there's one table, and it was a big table with a bunch of employees, staff there, and the boss was at the end talking and giving. It was a business meeting. It wasn't just a casual. And I was trying to get around them all, and I spilled a glass of water all over him. And I was just mortified, and I'm like, oh my God. He was not he just kind of brushed it off. He was definitely not happy about it. And he didn't respond in a very kind way, but he just kind of gritted his teeth and went on with what he was doing. But the things we have to do in order to get to where we need to go are sometimes interesting. They can take us down different trails. So it sounds to me like you've always had a passion for stories, for English, for expressing yourself through at least written word. Are there some other expressions that you use as well, or is writing your primary and means of communicating?
I would say that writing is definitely my primary means of communication. But it's interesting because I think life is just full of transitions. And yeah, I've felt for the past year now, I felt sort of a calling, or sort of like an urge to, yeah, to try expressing myself in other ways.
Mm.
And, um, and so before, the way that I guess best way to say it is to help others or to empower others, to kind of share, life lessons with others, was through my writing and through blogging.
Mm.
And that was sort of the genesis of Generate Magic. So it was a blog originally. And but then I started thinking, well, I really, one of the things that I loved about being an English teacher was the interactions with students.
Mm.
And how we would just be, sitting around in a circle, talking about, books, and talking about like all the lessons from books. And it would just really feel like alive, in the classroom. And, and so trying to think of like some way that I could merge all of that. So merge like the writing part and then the interaction part. And so that's when I started to feel like an urge to go into coaching. And so that's yes, it's sort of been a new journey for me. And so getting out on podcasts like this and doing summits. I did my first summit a couple of days ago. And all of this is just completely new for me. I never, in my wildest dreams, especially as a teenager when I was just super shy, I never would have imagined myself doing this.
Mm,
But yeah, there was something inside of me just saying, that I needed to express myself in a new way.
sure. I can also relate to the super shy teenager state. I was, at least in my mind, I was the shyest person in school. So I was reluctant to talk to anybody while I was at school. My life outside school is a little bit different, but still, I will. I at that time I would not envision me doing what I'm doing now, where speaking is such a huge part of my life and writing and expressing myself in different ways. I think
Absolutely.
it's
Like,
exciting to see how not only how other people can evolve and transition, but also ourselves.
for sure, yes. And yes, I could definitely relate to that as a teenager. Like, I would go entire days without speaking to anybody.
Mm,
Because when I was really, I would say probably from the age of 3, I remember having like distinct memories that there was something that was really wrong with me. Um,
mm.
like there was like I was just some sort of like factory defect. And then and then the outside world would kind of like reinforce this, not like in really like overt ways, but kind of like subtle ways.
Mm.
Like the parent, people at daycare would tell my parents like why does she like tell stories to herself like out loud, and like why doesn't she play with other kids? And I think my parents even took me to some doctors to try and figure out what was wrong with me. And I would get teased a lot when I was a kid. And so then when I was a teenager, I figured out, well, if I just stay very quiet and like kind of make myself invisible, then nobody will bother me and everybody will just kind of leave me alone. So it was definitely like a coping mechanism for sure.
So story was something you kind of, it sounds like you had a really rich imagination and internal kingdom, as I like to refer to it. Uh, just walking around telling yourself stories and that type of thing. While I can see how that could be of concern to some people, I think it's really kind of cool that you had that rich of an imagination in order to be able to do that. I also, as I was growing up and even now, story is where I go to not only to escape, but also to find myself. That story is separate from our normal day-to-day world in a way, but it's also a reflection of our day-to-day world. How do we, the lessons that we learn from Harry Potter or the Twilight series or my favorite, like Wrinkle in Time, that that these rich worlds that were created, while they're very, we don't normally see, I can't look out the window and see kids from Hogwarts flying around on brooms. But we can still use our imagination to take us where we want to go. That our imagination can create the world that we want to be seeing. And if we're limited to like what's immediately right in front of our eyes and what everybody else sees, then that world is not as rich or abundant as it could be if we actually opened up our imaginative eyes and saw things in a little bit different way, right?
Absolutely. And I think one story that's very representative of that is the Never Ending Story. It was my favorite movie as a kid, and I could really relate to the main character in it because as a boy he's bullied a lot and he's not good at math, and but then he reads this book and he becomes completely absorbed like in the world of the book, and then he becomes like this very like heroic character named Atreyu, who's just like riding this dragon and going on all these like missions. And I think, yeah, I think story really does allow like those possibilities.
Yes. Which reminds me of, you have quite a few posts on Medium. The post that I read today was your adventure of moving down to Mexico from, not, tell us a bit about what that experience was like. And was that a bit like riding a dragon in a never ending story type of way?
Well, yes, that's a rich story for sure. um, so yes, I guess it was, yeah, I guess about a year and a half ago when I moved to Mexico. It seems like a lifetime ago. And I, um, I grew up in Texas in a small town, and then I went to college, went to Los Angeles for college. And as my parents had feared, I didn't want to come back. I wanted to stay in LA. So I stayed there for about 17 years. Um, and then,
Wow.
um, and then around 2020, I, um, I came back to, I went back to live with my parents in Texas. And it was, yeah, it was around the time, you know, the pandemic started, and my boyfriend at the time, he was watching all these YouTube videos, these kind of like doom and gloom videos. It was like, you know, we have to get out of LA, and which in a sense it was probably, you know, a good idea. And but you know how it is. Like, I'm generally a pretty positive person, but when somebody, you know, when people around you are very anxious, it can kind of affect you. And so
Sure.
he was like, we have to leave at once. And so we just packed up all our stuff into a van and left a lot of stuff behind. And yeah, we just we went to Texas to go live with my parents. And at the time, our relationship, it wasn't really that good, and it got much worse living living with my parents. And so we would just fight constantly, and then he would refuse to interact with my parents. And so there was like an upstairs and a downstairs, and we were downstairs. And so then I would go upstairs with my parents, and then when I was with my parents, they would say, "Well, what's wrong with your boyfriend? You know, why doesn't he like us?" And then he would always be like, "You know, what's wrong with your parents?" So it was just like a really, yeah, from both, getting it from both ends. And so then and then he was watching, you know, we were both, for evening entertainment, mostly to keep from fighting, we would watch YouTube videos, and the same kind of like doom and gloom videos. And then he was like, you know, we need to leave the country. And to me, that was kind of like my opportunity. I was like, okay, I can escape the situation. And, and I was not really thinking like logically at all. Like, I didn't really have like a plan. Um, I just started watching like YouTube videos about Oaxaca, and which is the place in Mexico where I am now. And like it just seemed like this magical place. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to step into this magical wonderland, and all the problems are just going to disappear. And then the day before we had planned to leave, he he was actually driving our car and got into an accident. And thankfully nobody was hurt, but the car was damaged pretty badly. Um, and so then and then he was like, I don't think we should leave the country. And then I was like, well, if we don't leave now, we're never going to leave. So again, just not really thinking logically at all. And so we, you know, so the front fender, you know, was just barely, I think we put some twist ties on there to keep it propped up.
Wow.
And to keep my parents from freaking out, I just said we were going on a trip. And, which I guess was kind of true. In my mind, I wanted to move to Mexico, but I didn't really know, I didn't really have a solid plan. And so it wasn't completely a lie. And, and so, hardly any money. And yeah, we just left. And we barely spoke Spanish, and the all sorts of problems like with the GPS, and constantly getting lost. And it was funny because we would be Mexico. I didn't even realize just how beautiful it is. It's very, very beautiful country. But we would be driving along some, mountain vista, and we would be like, "Wow, this is so beautiful." And then a second later, he would be like, "Wait, where are we?" And I was supposed to be navigating. I would be like, I don't know. And then it would turn into a fight.
Wow.
And the rest.
But you finally landed where you are, right?
Yes, and that itself was a miracle, because the day where I am, it's like super remote, and I knew it was remote, but I wasn't anticipating just how remote it would be, and so then it was actually the night that I had every morning we would start out, we would get off to an early start, but we would always end up getting lost, and so it would get to be dark. And so the place where we were headed, was like this intentional community. And so the woman who had founded the community, I was kind of in communication with her, and she was the one that was kind of giving me directions. And so it got to be dark, and I was really kind of getting lost trying to find the place. And she says, "Oh, don't worry, just get a hotel, and then try again, in the morning." And so in the morning, it was all, bright and early. And once again, off to an optimistic start. And so first, we stopped at an ATM, and to do a withdrawal. And then the card just got like stuck in there. And there was like some sort of like error message. And
On the car or the ATM?
On the ATM. And so I was trying to explain, to the people, at the store, at the bank, what had happened. And they were like, "Oh, well, I need to call my bank in the US." And it was all this back and forth. But long story short, we were completely out of pesos and no card. And the car was almost out of gas. And, and so then we were driving, we were driving up the road, and it starts out like it's a really nice paved road, but then it kind of turns off into like this dirt road. And so, and I was the one navigating. And so we passed the place where we were supposed to turn. I was like, "Oh, wait, I think that was it." And so, and I didn't mean for him to make a U-turn right then, but he did. And it turned out to be the exact wrong place to make a U-turn. Because the car just got stuck, because it was just like leaves and branches on the side of the road. And so we were stranded there. And so he started like, I guess, sort of walking along the side of the road to find help. And then I was just kind of standing there, next to the car. And I remember distinctly like standing there and just feeling like miserable. And like, as the cars were like coming around the corner, I was like, I hope one of them just like hits me. And, like, takes me out of my and so finally, he's able to find like a truck, to help him. And so he comes up, in the truck, and so they strap some ropes to it, and they're pulling, and the car still isn't moving, but they were very helpful and very determined. And so finally they pull the car into motion, but the whole entire front just completely comes off. So,
Wow.
so and so we and so at this point we're just like in this tiny village, and but somehow we're able to find a mechanic in the village, and the mechanic is, it's just like a village, so they don't have a lot of resources, but he's at least able to kind of like nail in some things in the place and piece it together. And he, he kind of, I want to make sure that we're not going to get lost again. And so he kind of like draws a map in the sand. and, and I'm like praying the whole time that the car also doesn't either fall apart or run out of gas. And by the way, we're also driving in a Kia Forte, which is great for cities, but not good for like these dirt roads. And, with all sorts of like rocks and gravel. And
Sure.
so I can just hear like rocks and grass like scraping up the bottom of the car. And I'm like, oh, like, yeah, again, just thinking there's no way we're going to make it. But then I see this building and it has this mural on it with a snake. And that was the mural that the owner of the property had described to me. That was like a signal that we had made it. I don't think I had ever been so happy to see a building in my life. So, yeah, and then everybody in the community was just so warm and like welcoming, and they were like, "Well, what happened to your car?" And we were just we were like, "Well, it's a long story." And so,
Wow.
and from there on up, it was much better, but. But I think that showed, sometimes the things you want in life, it is kind of a struggle to get there. Or you do have to kind of push a bit. It's not. Sometimes people say, "Oh, well, if it's a struggle, it's not meant to be." But I don't entirely believe that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think sometimes some things worth having can be a bit of a struggle.
Sure. Yeah. And honestly, I think the struggle is one of the things that can help us to realize the power that we have within us. That if everything were easy, we wouldn't have much challenge and we wouldn't learn or grow much in the process.
Absolutely.
And I can relate to, there was a time not that long ago that if I ever ran into any kind of conflict along my way to get to where it was that I wanted to go, that I'd take that as a signal that I needed to go a different direction, because if it was where I'm supposed to be going, there shouldn't be any opposition to where I'm meant to be going. And so I'd start and stop and start and stop and start and stop, going in different directions until I finally realized, maybe this opposition thing, the challenges is actually part of the journey. That the obstacle is the way, as one book puts it, rather than
Ryan Holiday.
Yes, that's it. That the obstacle is the way, not in the way.
Absolutely.
So how can we take those seemingly obstacles and transform them into something better?
Yes, and there's somebody that a speaker, well, he's, I guess, kind of a thought leader that I really like, Derek Rydell. And the way that he put it, he said that it's, when you're lifting weights, for instance, it's the resistance that makes you stronger.
Right.
Yeah, and so basically kind of leveraging that resistance to make you like a more resilient and to make you like a stronger person.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that's one thing that I've noticed, especially about the people in Mexico, is they're very resilient, and they always have a really great attitude. Also, like when they were pulling out the car, and I was like super like stressed out and upset, and they were just like, yeah, just having like a great time. And like, and they were, when I wanted to give up, they were like, no, we're gonna get it. And so
wow, that's great. So I'm curious as to how you help your clients, the people that you work with, to generate magic, to go from a, as you put it, bored to thrilled to be alive.
um, well, yes, I think it's just about kind of leveraging everything for all it's worth. Yeah, realizing there is no waste. Like I used to think, oh, this was such a waste of time, or this was such a wasted experience, or I wasted my life. Like, but it all, there's definitely kind of some, times when it's good to kind of reflect and be like, is this the direction I keep wanting? I want to keep going. And yeah, and kind of take stock of where you're going, but at the same time, kind of looking back at your past, not only is it pointless really to kind of like dwell, on things that have already happened, but I think also there's a lot of gold in that. And there's a lot of richness and there's a lot of lessons, because all of that kind of makes up our life story, and all of that makes up, who we are.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I could have said, oh, I should have, when I moved to a different country, I should have been much more prepared. I should have, but at the same time, and, if I decide to move to a foreign country in the future, I probably would be more prepared. But at the same time, it does make for a really great story. So,
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I know for me, when I did something similar but different, I was living in Seattle, and I fell in love with the architecture in San Francisco, and so I just moved there without a job, without a place to live, without any kind of preparation. Really, I had some contacts there, fortunately, but it took some time to figure out, how do I make this work? And San Francisco was a very different place than Seattle was. For one thing, it was much more expensive than Seattle was, and I had to figure out, how do I make this work? And while I could have taken more time to be prepared, I would have missed out on the opportunities that I had to learn if I had been more prepared. I would.
absolutely. And people say that about relationships too. Like if you end one relationship, you have to completely heal and completely learn all your lessons. But I think, we're always learning lessons. And, and when you go into a new relationship, that's kind of like part of the learning process and part of the healing process.
Yeah. I think if we wait for us to be fully healed before we move on to the next thing, at least in my experience, I would be waiting a very long time and not be moving forward very quickly.
Absolutely.
So,
and yeah,
that said, I think there is a lot of value in making sure that you heal along the way.
For sure. Definitely.
But it's all a process. It's all a journey.
For sure. And I think a big part of it too with it's just having fun, having fun and injecting humor into the situation, I think definitely really helps. Because I realize there's so many times in my life where I just took myself so seriously.
Yes.
And I remember as a teenager, especially because I was so quiet, and writing was the only way that I could express myself and make myself heard. And so every time I would write something, I would just, in my head, it would almost be like I was sending kind of psychic signals to all my classmates, like, please read it, like, please just see me. And there was some, in our senior year in high school, we did short stories. And the story that I wrote, I could say now that it was awful. It was like, I was trying, it was like trying to be like Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Conrad, all kind of like rolled into one. And it was trying to be kind of like quirky, but also very deep and profound. And
yes.
And I remember like when we passed around our stories, well, we just kind of all set our stories. We printed them out and then set them in this big pile. and would just read each other's stories. And I was just holding my breath, waiting for all my classmates to read my story and tell me how brilliant it was. And they would all like start like reading like for like a few seconds and then just put it down and just move on. I was like so like heartbroken. And I think one of my classmates said, "Oh, this is like too deep," or something like that. I think that taught me like a good lesson, that people want to be entertained. I think it's one of the lessons, but also, yeah, like I was just holding like so tightly to this, like, oh, wanting to be revered and wanting people to see what a genius I was.
Right. Yes. So I'm curious as to how you went from that high school experience to where you are now, where you've got a decent sized following on Medium from what and again, I don't spend a whole lot of time on Medium, but I know you've got a decent sized following. So you must have found those people who really resonate with what you're putting out there. What was the journey like for you to go from kind of struggling to connect as a high schooler to connecting as you do now?
Well, yes, that's a great question. And even I definitely believe very much that life is a journey, but the journey is not always linear, right? It doesn't always just go, from in a straight line from point A to point B.
Sure.
But I think there's kind of a lot of little stops along the way, or a lot of little seeds along the way that kind of make up, or important basically, or lead you to your purpose, or lead you along the way on your mission.
Sure.
And I don't think we have just one purpose. I think we have many purposes. But there's a lot of just kind of meaningful, impactful moments along the way. And one of the moments that really impacted me, kind of connecting to the story in high school, is when I took fiction writing workshops in college. And I was still, trying to be really serious and profound, and I wanted to write like the great American novel. And then I had this professor who's also a writer who I'd really admire, Amy Bender, who just really had like a playful approach. And so we would do lots of writing exercises, things like, just take the third book on your shelf, and the fourth line is the first line of your story. So exercises like that, that really just kind of brought out like a light, like more playful side to my writing. And so that really helped me, as far as my writing, to really kind of connect with people more, and to bring, just kind of more lightness into it, and more fun and more joy really into it, instead of just like squeezing, so hard.
Yeah.
So it was more fun for me writing it, and then it was also more fun for people reading it as well. So yeah, I would say that was definitely like a pivotal moment for me.
Wow, that's great. So what I'm hearing in that is that, there's the craft of writing, the kind of the nuts and bolts of writing, but there's also the having fun with writing. Definitely. And maybe not taking ourselves so seriously. Mm-hmm. So that, for me to write, I need to write like Kurt Vonnegut or.
Definitely. And it's good with blogging now, because the thing about blogging is it's immediate. Like you put it out there, and then immediately there's a reaction to it, and then it also kind of gives you the space to reflect on it as well. And so one thing that I try to do is I always try to be very kind of transparent, and always kind of like, if I see myself kind of straying too far, like from my kind of core values, then I write another post. I'm like, okay, like for instance, I wrote a post recently, or a few months ago, where I was kind of I realized afterwards I kind of came across as sort of being self-serious or dramatic. And so then I wrote another post in response to that one, being like, wow, I was like really dramatic in that post. Let's kind of turn it down a notch and just remember to have fun. So it's a constant reminder. It's not like one of those things you just set it and then it's done.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, like coaches and writers and speakers that I admire are like that too. Like they're very kind of just transparent in what they're struggling with, or if they, if they make something and then afterwards they're like, oh, well, I kind of like misspoke, or that wasn't exactly what I meant to say. Like I really like that transparency.
Yes. Yeah. And while you're sharing this, I'm thinking it's not unlike getting your car stuck when you were moving to where you are right now. But not every road that we take is the smooth highway that, we get off at exit 152 and, it's right there and no bumps in the road.
Exactly. Yes.
But sometimes we get our car stuck and figuring out how to get that car unstuck is what actually makes it a great story.
Yes. Definitely.
So how do we do that as writers? Because it's really easy to get caught up in I don't know, maybe a little bit of imagining being more like Kurt Vonnegut or Madeleine L'Engle or J.K. Rowling or whatever, but have our favorite authors and think that we need to be like them. And so we try to be something that we're not. And in the process, we lose our voice. I think finding our voice and developing our voice, whether it be our spoken voice or our written voice, is something that is a journey in and of itself. Uh-oh, looks like we have lost connection. So I will wait a little bit and then see if we can reconnect.